So, hey, morning everybody. Let me turn down the music so it's less distracting. Good day, wherever you are and wherever you're from. Yeah, today, thought I would once again do the same thing, make the live stream about a question that got answered, or asked, pardon me, and provide an answer for it. Really and truthfully, when it gets right down to it, sometimes some questions take a little bit more than just a simple yes or no or a simple answer. And actually, a lot of today is going to be about questions. So today, what I thought we'd do is look at a question that was asked by Mark T. He liked one of the videos. I'm sorry, Mark, I can't remember exactly which one, but he asked about if I've made a video on taking witness statements yet. And now, honestly, I let him know I did a video on it about when I was, or a little bit of a video on investigating the scene. And it was a lengthy video, and a little bit of it did touch on talking to witnesses, etc. But really and truthfully, honestly, it needs its own video. It's a significant part of the investigative process. But once again, it also needs that opportunity for questions to be asked, answered, etc. So I thought, well, what I'm going to do is let's talk about it. And it's more than just taking a witness statement. So let's talk about the incident, interviews, and all of that goes into it. Once again, hop into the chat. Feel free to let me know your thoughts, etc. In fact, actually, let's, and I'll just bring the mic up just a little bit closer there. Maybe the sound will be better. Let's talk about the chat rules just for a sec. Okay, your participation is, well, it's awesome when you do participate, ask questions, enter, provide your thoughts, etc. Because that's what it's all about. This whole thing is about more than just me talking. It's about you asking questions. It's about you offering opinions, etc. So to begin with, introduce yourself, where you're from, what you're doing, etc. Keep in mind that your opinions count, your interaction counts, your participation counts. So ask and answer. I don't mind it at all. I like to see the interaction within the streams. Also, the same thing counts with the comments afterwards. But beyond that, be civil. No name calling, no insults. Be professional. And on the note of professional, this is not professional advice, okay? There's no contracts being signed. There's no money changing hands or anything else like that. This is an opportunity for collaboration. So what I do for those of you that are new or just joining the stream or never participated before, usually what I do is either give a brief presentation on what the stream's about, sort of like almost like a lecture or a lesson. But it's a presentation. I don't like the term lecture, but anyway, it's a presentation, and today we're going to be talking about incident interviews and how to do them. And then there's always going to be a follow-up of question and answer if there's been any questions throughout the stream, and I'll try to get to questions as they come along in the chat, but I'll do my best to round everything up at the end. And of course, what I try to do is address any questions that have come in the previous 2 weeks. So there you go. Now, on that note too, I always want to know what you think. Okay, I've had some very encouraging comments. Actually, most of the comments have been encouraging and positive. I've also had some very critical ones, but those critical ones are what help me to get better. So I appreciate them all the time. Honestly, I do. Now, the important thing, let's get into talking about incident investigations. What a lot of people tend to forget is when you're doing the interviews, there's a lot of different approaches, honestly. There's different methods, different approaches, and you may use one single method or approach, or you may make it a mixture and culmination of a lot of different things. Realize one thing is your approach is going to be solely dependent and reflective on the size and complexity of the incident. I mean, if it's a situation where there was a close call, nobody got hurt, and really very little property damage or none, you know what? Your incident investigation may get wrapped up with a few statements and a few photographs, and you may get it all done by the end of the day or within a few hours. But if there's been significant damage, property loss, time loss, people have been hurt, etc., then you know what? Your methodology of conducting the investigation and the incident interviews are going to be solely dependent on that, and they may take over the course, and I've done investigations where they've run a gamut of over a month. Yes. So now the other thing that's important is it's not investigation. Let me repeat this and emphasize it as much as I can. You're not a cop, okay? If you were, you're not now. And if you're investigating this in the capacity of a safety professional, then the key word is professional. It's not an interrogation. Which brings me to the next point. Respect, diplomacy, and tact are key. Okay, heavy-handed tactics and authoritarian approach, dare I say, I hate the term, but safety Nazi approach, or the typical, and that's why I've never liked being called a safety officer, okay, is I want to approach it with the notion of prevention is the key. To talk about, there was a show back a few years ago with tons of spin-offs, but CSI. And the main character in it used to always say, well, let the science speak for itself. But what I mean by that, what I want to indicate with that is the interviews and the statements are only part of the investigation. There's still that gathering of data that you're going to do. Okay, and you're going to examine the data, taking measurements, etc. So this is only a part. And the idea is that everything should corroborate and complement each other. Okay? Now, the other important piece to remember is it's facts over feelings, and certainly over opinions. You may have an opinion, excuse me, and the people you're talking to may have opinions. There may be bystanders that have opinions. Regardless, opinions are great. I always say they're like eyebrows. Everybody has, well, one, hopefully two, but I mean, it really doesn't matter. It's facts first. Then, once you've compiled and gathered all of the facts, then it can help you to form conclusions. Right now, opinions got to be put on the shelf. The other thing, opinions lead to biases. And one of the things that you don't, or biases, depending, one of the things you don't want to develop, and I've done a video and talked about it before, is walking into a scene and forming anchoring bias. Okay? When you form anchoring bias, it just gives you this predetermined, prejudgmental notion on what's occurred. And really and truthfully, you don't want that. Okay? You want to be able to approach it with a clear, open mind and not form biases. You want to form conclusions. So you have to kind of park your feelings at the door and use logic. Okay? Now, the very first thing you want to do when you approach is you always want to ensure a few things. Number one, the safety of everybody. Okay? Injured people, excuse me, sorry about that. Injured people need to be looked after first. Okay? There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Okay? If there's been people that have been injured, they have to be looked after first. The scene has to be made safe. Any kind of foreign hazardous substance leaking in has to be stopped. Water leaking, etc., it needs to be stopped. So you need to fix that. You need to make sure that everything is safe and the injured have been looked after, and then preserve the scene in continuity. Okay? And what I mean by scene preservation and continuity is block it off, close the doors, make sure that people aren't traipsing back and forth. Understanding, though, that those involved may have to clean up and get everything tidied up first so that it is safe. So you have to weigh both options while you're doing this. Now, the other thing that you need to do is understand your limitations. Okay, like if it's just been one or two people that have been involved in the incident and witnessed it, etc., then you know what? Your methodology of interviewing and how you're going to tackle the interviews is going to be fairly simple. Okay? But if you've had a complex scenario where there's been quite a few people involved and sorry about that, and quite a few witnesses, then you're going to need to maybe share the chores. And I've said this before many times, and if you haven't done so yet, then I would say that you need to add this to the beginning of your list of to-dos, is to make sure that your health and safety committee has the knowledge, skills, and ability to support you with those large situations, with those large investigations. Whether it be just using a pre-scripted statement process and taking the statement where you can follow up later and getting that information right away, or to helping you secure the scene and move forward, then you know what? You need to do that. Okay? And you know what? I honestly do, that you go through your whole entire career with never having to do something like that and handle that kind of situation. But speaking as a person who's been there and done that, many hands make for lighter work, and it actually gets you, enables you to get the job done properly and well. Now, the other thing you need to do is think of the concentric circle of participants and your priorities. So the people that were directly involved, the immediate witnesses and bystanders, and then beyond that, those that arrived after the incident occurred, but within the first few minutes. So think of those concentric circles as your prioritization. I meant to get a prop. Just excuse me for a second. Sorry about that. Now, the next thing, and you know, I'm going to rant about this for just a second, if you don't mind. I follow quite a few safety professionals on the Provoking Safety Twitter site, and you know, there's a Twitter stream, and they talked about clipboards, and they talked about how archaic, and I just use my iPad, or I just use my tablet, and that's what I use. That's the only thing that accompanies me to an incident scene. And great, good for you. Honestly, good for you. I am impressed. But a couple of things to remember here is these puppies here, you know what? They don't crack and break when you drop them. Honestly, they don't. The other thing is papers, pens, and pencils don't run out of batteries. Okay, you can use a couple of cheap pens versus one iPad stylus or tablet stylus or whatever. And they don't run out of batteries, they don't lose charge, and if you lose it, you're not out $100. Okay, so don't minimize or poo-poo papers, pens, pencils. Okay, they are a good thing, and I'll show you. And I've done a whole video on site preparation and scene preparation and being prepared for an incident. And a clipboard's a main one of them, and I'll talk about it a bit later on as we move through this whole thing. But don't minimize it that it's not a necessary piece of kit, okay? I think you would be doing yourself a disservice. In fact, one little piece before I move on is I hired 2 safety consultants to work for me, and there's significant construction projects going on in an organization I worked for. And so I hired these guys to do the consultation. And believe you me, I interviewed women. These were just the outstanding candidates for the job. I'm not sexist in any way. But these 2 fellows, I bought them both iPads and loaded them up with forms and everything that they could use and process stuff. And you know what? They still preferred either a clipboard or a moleskin notebook and a pen. And what they did use the iPads for is when they were able to, they just went to a touchdown area and wrote some notes or compiled their reports or whatever before they got back to the office. And then they just transferred the document to their computer. So, you know what? Realistically, and honestly, one of these people was in his early 30s. And so technology was something they embraced, but by and large, still preferred the paper and pen route. Okay, so anyway, thanks for entertaining me on my rant about pens, pencils, paper, etc. Honestly, to tell you the truth, I still prefer it, and it's almost, I would dare say, something that's genetically imprinted on us to be able to follow that process in writing stuff down and how we remember it and how we recall it. So, I don't know. Don't forego it, that's for sure. Or at least add it to your kit and have it complement your tablets and technology. Now, getting back to this once again, it's not a crime scene, okay? Yes, you have to treat it very similar, with the exception it's not an adversarial approach, okay? We want to be able to approach it with that same professionalism, that our whole end goal is prevention, so that we keep everybody safe and nobody gets hurt. Now, we have to remember that there's different methodology in doing the interview process. And I've used single approaches or a combination of the following approaches that I'm going to talk about. The first one is the timeline dialogue. Now, what I mean by that is you allow the person to work from their timeline to where the incident occurred. So use a landmark like the start of the day, arriving at work. If you're in a camp setting, the next closest meal time like breakfast or during their lunch or whatever. Ask the person to recall what they did from that point on. So, like for instance, let's say the incident occurs at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So, hey, what did you have for lunch? Start the person off with that. And then say, okay, now, thinking about that, can you work through what occurred right from the time you had lunch all the way through? Now, there's a few good points for that. Number one, it puts the person at ease. They're not looking at you as though you want to drill right in and get right to that scenario and what happened and so forth. You are concerned about them and their perceptions and what they thought. Now, the other thing that helps is if they are being really deceptive, if they have that thought, they likely have rehearsed the story from the incident on. They likely haven't rehearsed the story from lunchtime or breakfast time or whatever. So chances are what they're going to do is just put everything in chronological order and tell you exactly what happened. Now, the other thing is you can confirm parts of their story by getting them to tell it backward too. So when they tell you the story right from lunchtime, say, oh, okay, so now let's say we've got to this point. I'm talking to you. I want you to go backward, all the way backward to lunch. Now, you don't necessarily have to do it because chances are the person isn't lying. But if you see huge gaping holes in their story, it can help you to fill in because nobody rehearses a story from going backwards. They don't. Okay? Once something's occurred and they think, oh boy, it's going to hit the fan, they start thinking about their story as it happened, not from back to front. Okay, so that's one method. Now, another method that I like to use, and depending on how much is going on and how many people are talking in my ear and my phone's ringing, etc., is the 5 whys approach. Okay, it's simplistic, it's very pragmatic and businesslike, but it works. Okay, it works. It just plain works. And that's basically who, what, where, why, when. Maybe even a how in there. But what it does is it helps you to gather those facts quickly, and it helps you to also remember what qualifying questions to ask at each step. Because you can say, okay, so can you tell me when you arrived here on the scene? Say you're interviewing a bystander who arrived just after they heard the crash and bang. Can you tell me who was here? And they could say Joe, Pete, and Rob. Okay, well, so Joe, Pete, and Rob. Yeah, they were all involved. They were all there. They were gathered around the scaffold, whatever the case may be. Yeah, it was Joe, Pete, and Rob. Okay, great. Now, I want you to think back and just imagine looking left and right. Did you see anybody else? So that helps you to qualify, okay? And it can get you to remember to ask those qualifying questions quick at each step. Now, the other thing where it does help too is it's the easiest method to train your health and safety committee or those that may be helping you. Okay? Because they can just write down who, what, where, why, when. I don't care which order the W's are in. Honestly, I don't. But they can write it down and just write the quick answers beside it. Okay, so it's one of the easiest ways, and if you want, you can combine it with the timeline dialogue, or you can combine it with the next approach that I prefer to use as well, and that's the small talk approach. And you could use the first 2 points along with this. And what this does is, and I've used it where I've actually seen people I've had men who were almost in tears and crying because they thought this was going to be the last straw and they're going to get canned. I've had lots of people get extremely upset in this whole thing, and a lot of times what it takes is you just putting them at ease. Just having that opportunity to talk to them and approach it like, I don't know, a real human being, and give them that opportunity to be at ease and not worried. So like I said, you can combine it with the 5 W's and the timeline. Now, the one thing I would suggest, though, is there's a couple of points here. You have to be right on point, because what happens is you can always end up with those people where they get stuck in the details. Well, I saw Pete, Rob, and John here, but you know about Pete, like once again, showing up looking like he just slept in the same clothes or whatever. Now, that point might be important, but if it turns into, and I've talked to Pete about this, and I've said, look, we got to be professional. We got to still look like we're working here. And Pete's response to me was, well, I was up late last night with the kids, and the wife is pregnant, and so you can see where it's going to go. It's going to be a train wreck. Make sure that you can also keep on point and bring that person back in, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. So it's similar to just approaching the whole thing like a benign conversation. And like I said, you can combine it with 1 or 2 of the previous points. Now, the other point that is a lot of people like to use is it's the different views approach. Okay, great. You saw the scene occur. Now, can you do me a favor? I want you've told me everything that happens, and you can use this as a compliment add-on to the statement that the person's given. You've wrote down everything that's happened, or you've told me everything that's happened. What about if you were over to your left? If there was that person was over to your left, can you tell me what they would be looking at? Okay? Or like if there's a fly in the wall up there, what did the fly see? A couple of things where this helps is it provides that person an opportunity for disassociation. They can step back from the scene. Yes, David, exactly. A relaxed and non-threatening approach. But going back to the different views approach, it allows that person to disassociate a little bit and sort of remove themselves slightly from the scene. Now, there are some drawbacks to it because depending on the person's background, they might not get it. Or if they're ESL especially, that might be a very difficult approach for them. So it's not one that I use. I've never used it, but I've had colleagues, friends, and friends of mine that were in law enforcement often used it. So, but once again, it's a tool in the box. You don't necessarily have to use it until the need arises. So now, just some general tips and principles. And these aren't in any order of importance. These are some principles that you need to follow when conducting your interviews. I've talked about some of them before, just as a quick overview at the beginning of this session. But like anything else, here's another question I would appreciate you answering too. Would you be interested in a case study approach? The idea that we, over the course of weeks, maybe months will likely be the more thing, that we worked on a case study, a scene, and we worked on it together, me moderating, and working on it right from beginning to end. Because I have had requests for a summary of the investigation process. So what I'd likely do is start off with a live stream just previous saying, here's the investigative process and a summary of it. And it would take a whole entire live stream because we'd work through the different steps. And then next live stream, here's the case study. Let's begin and maybe cover one or two steps each session. So think about it and let me know what you think on that. So back to our tips. Number one, be calm and professional. Got to watch it because YouTube warns you, and there's constantly messages in your inbox about cussing during a stream or a video, etc. But one of the things might be to be calm and professional, avoid getting angry because people are going to push your buttons. They are. They're going to challenge you, push your buttons, maybe be belligerent and adversarial. But no matter what, be calm, be professional. The other thing, be genuinely interested in what they have to say. Nobody is going to be impressed with, yeah, okay, what happened next? Okay, and then next? Okay, where were you? Like, no, look at them. Make eye contact. Ask the questions and watch your body language. Watch your nonverbals. Watch your tone. Now, the other thing, and I can't emphasize this enough, make sure that you emphasize to them the purpose is prevention, not discipline. Now, I'm not saying that it might not hit the fan as a result. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that your intention is prevention, not discipline. If they ask, am I going to get fired for that? Honestly, you don't know. In the back of your head, you're likely thinking, oh yeah, likely. But honestly, you don't know because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Nobody does. So no matter what, say, I don't know. Right now, my focus is on preventing a similar incident. So that's why I want to get all the information possible. And this next one is a hard one, but no judgment. Okay? Yes, they may have done a dumbass thing. They may have pulled a really stupid move. They like, realistically, they may have gone so far off book, the safety book I'm talking about, that you couldn't even find it, or they couldn't find it. But no matter what, no passing judgment. Remember, your end goal is to find out what occurred, what happened, so that you can prevent similar incidents. Okay? Now, the next thing is you have to be in control of the interview. And you will find those people that get lost in the details. And literally, I interviewed a person once, and that interview should have taken no more than half an hour, tops. After an hour, because it was so difficult, he was like a Labrador puppy. He honestly was. As soon as you asked him a question, it was basically petered off into the wilderness and the weeds. And I had to constantly draw him back. And that's one of the things. You're going to have those people that are either easily distracted, squirrel, or they are going to get so lost in the details, they actually forget the original question. So always control that interview, be in control, rein them in by constantly asking those questions and qualifying questions. Now, on the note of qualifying questions, watch yourself that you don't get lost in the weeds either, okay? If you've asked one question, qualified it, maybe you don't have to ask a third. Only ask it if there's still holes in the story or something that's uncertain. And if you have to, your last qualifying question may have to be a very direct question, okay? Where you're going to get a yes or no, not an open-ended question. Okay? We always want to ask open-ended questions. We don't want to ask ones that are going to get us yes or no. But if we've already asked a qualifying question, we might have to be really direct and get that closed-ended yes or no question. Okay? Because we don't want to ask the same thing over and over again, because we're just going to push their buttons, make them mad, and then they're going to be uncooperative. Okay? But if we ask that open-ended question where requires more than a yes or no, they're going to provide you a narrative. They're going to be compelled to tell the story in their own words. So watch your questions. And it's not unusual that you might have to have a written set of scripted questions just that you can rely upon when you're just starting out. Okay? I'll talk more about that in a bit, especially when I talk about the clipboard. Okay? Whatever you do, allow the interviewee to ask questions. I've said this before about other people asking you questions. Okay? Don't look at them as a challenge. Just answer the question. But when you answer their questions, guide the person back into answering yours. Okay? Because a lot of times the question they're asking is just a question. Don't look at it as a challenge. And if it is a challenging question, just answer it. That's the best way to do it. Now, the other thing that you want to do is avoid the use of technical terms, especially if the other person might not be aware of them. And don't use it just so you look smart and good and everything. There's no need. Okay? Someone very close and dear to me says to me all the time, why didn't you just say that instead of using that big word? Yeah, okay, good point. So make sure you're talking to the person that you're interviewing them. And that's why you want to set the stage and start that small talk off so that you can sort of understand how you're going to form your questions. Because you don't want to have to try repeating the question 3 or 4 times. It's going to make them feel inadequate. Okay? So avoid those technical terms and avoid the complex vocabulary, especially if the other person might not be aware of it. Now, the other thing is, don't be an expert where you shouldn't be. Okay? You don't want to run the risk of losing credibility and trust at an early stage of investigation. So honestly, Admitting your lack of knowledge of something isn't a bad thing. In fact, you're far better off to admit, hey, show me, tell me how this works, or I'm not familiar with this piece of equipment, so fill me in. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? That's why experts are hired, and that's why skilled employees are hired, etc. So unless you know fully about it, don't pretend you do. Okay? It goes a long ways. And you know what? And once again, this is sort of a knock on the employers that insist they have to hire safety professionals with exact experience in their field. You'd be very surprised to learn that the number one cause of time loss claims in most jurisdictions is the top three are musculoskeletal injuries from strains or sprains, slips, trips, and falls, and being struck by something. So really and truthfully, your safety professional is going to be looking at preventing those things. So once again, sorry, another rant. Now, a couple of other points. Don't draw conclusions during the interview. Okay? Don't enter into that confirmation bias where you've formed it, the anchoring bias in your head. I know what happened, and then paying attention only to the narrative that suits your narrative. The other thing is, it's too early to draw conclusions at any one point. It's not until you're sitting down quietly and have made several observations of all the data that you've gathered and maybe consulted other experts and got all of the lab findings in and got the original equipment manufacturer material in. In fact, I've done investigations where I wasn't able to draw reasonable conclusions until the original equipment manufacturer got back to me. So don't draw conclusions during the interview. Don't draw them at any point in the investigation until you've gathered all the data. Okay? Now, the other one, like I said, you have an opinion. You've likely started forming one within the moment you arrived on the scene. Okay? Just remember, it doesn't count. Facts over feelings and facts over opinions. Okay? And I already mentioned this, but I want to say it again. Use simple language when asking questions. Okay? Especially, we have to remember, especially when we're interviewing people that have either been involved in the incident, immediate bystanders and witnesses, or even those that arrived after. Especially if there's been people injured or hurt. Okay? You don't want to be asking complex questions with using complicated vocabulary when a simple language would do the job, when simple language questions would do the job. Okay? Now, the other thing that helps too, especially because we tend to put things together as we talk, so rephrase questions. Okay? Ask them again. Even randomize. If you've been using a who, what, where, when, why checklist, and they've told you who was there. Maybe when you get to the halfway through, you come back and say, okay, and use that point of saying, okay, look, you've just arrived on the scene, or you were standing by and watching it occur. Just close your eyes and imagine looking to the left and the right, maybe turning and looking behind you. Was there anybody else present? Or did you notice anybody in the periphery? So it's okay to randomize your questions to follow up to as well, because that might spur on additional thought. Honestly, I think we all can hold our hands high and say that we've been talking about something and all of a sudden it's helped us remember something else that we had just thought of. Okay? So on that note too, don't assume deception when that occurs. Just consider that they might have forgot, or somehow in their mind they thought it wasn't necessary information. Okay? And I know, contrary to what House said on TV, not everybody lies. Okay? I suppose we all could be prone to deception, but a lot of times, especially if you've set the stage well in the interview, they might not necessarily be lying. Now, the next piece, scrambling and scribbling notes. Lots of people hate it. In fact, hold on. I always advocate the use of these things, moleskins. I love them. I think they're great. Mine's been well used. They're a little bit more than the average ring notebook, small ring notebook, but the pages don't fall out. They're also really dependable, especially if they have to be admitted to evidence, because if all the pages are intact, you haven't been deceiving anything. I've always said too, whenever you're writing your notes, don't scribble and obliterate something, just draw a line through it and initial it. Because that maintains that evidentiary continuity. Now, on the note of note-taking during interviews, just a few quick tips to help you. Number one, be prepared, have that investigation kit, have a clipboard, okay? And it's easier to just use it. You have that nice firm writing surface, and I'll talk more about why I advocate these things to begin with. If you can sit down somewhere and talk to the person that you're talking to, it's great, okay? But on that note, you might have to do it standing, and that's also why the clipboard helps. But I find the moleskin is usually good enough that you can write on it without it bouncing around too much, but I do prefer a clipboard. In fact, I use both. Now, the other piece that I want to talk about is what I call a statement handout. And you can use these. Whoopsie. I'm just making it big enough on my screen so I can show everybody and share my screen. I'm going to disappear for a bit, so don't mind me. So what you see here, and I use Windows dark mode, so it's easier on the eyes, and the eyes are getting old. And you can have a bunch of these pre-printed that you can use on your clipboard. Whoops, right here, okay? And on the back of your clipboard, I always say that you should have an investigation checklist handy and that you can use. And then you can work your way through the investigation, especially if you're first starting out. But this thing just has a couple of questions. You can pass it out to the person, and they can just write their opinions in it and write their thoughts and answer the questions as they are. Where were you when the incident occurred? How far away? What brought you to the scene? Okay, some good questions, plus there's qualifiers in there. And it just helps, and especially if you're getting members of your health and safety committee to help you as well. It asks the who, what, where, why, when in there, but in such a combination that the person will just be answering the questions and writing the stuff down. At the end, and it's important, I've seen lots of organizations that will have 2 or 3 pages for a statement handout. I just have one, because one page is easier to pass out and easier to collect, okay? And then I just ask them at the bottom, can you turn the paper over, provide a rough sketch of the scene, rough estimated measurements, etc. Okay? So using the idea of the statement handout works quite well, okay? I don't know. I've used them. I've got people that have been helping me to pass them out and collect them afterwards. A lot of times, especially if you have, say, the supervisor arrive on the scene and they'll want to know what can they do to help. Hey, make them feel useful. Give them a few of these sheets and say, pass them out. Here's some pens from my investigation kit. Get everybody to write down a statement, fill it, write down the answers to the questions, collect them all, make sure that they've, they don't need to sign it, just make sure that they've wrote their name, etc., and how to contact them, because I may follow up, okay, depending on how many people you got to interview, okay? Now, the other thing is, while you're writing your notes, this may come as a big surprise, hold on, I'm writing notes. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people, I was guilty of it, trying to scribble as fast as I can, rather than just say, okay, hold on, pause for a sec, I just want to get that down. But also, too, is when you're doing this, some people tend to forget that, well, what are you trying to record? What notes are you trying to take? So understand that you can write small, slow, and take the time, or big, fast. That's why I advocate both the clipboard and don't underestimate the value of the clipboard. But what are you trying to record? What is it you're trying to note so that you can remember it after? Do you care about the ofs, the thes, and any other things like that? Write down points. Record the important points, 5 Ws. And when I first started off, I would write down literally who, what, where, why, when on my clipboard and start writing down the names and what happened and so forth, and the times, etc. It's easiest to do it that way. And once again, hold on, I'm taking notes. I know, got mentioned twice. There's a reason for that. And it's funny because I've also talked to junior investigators, and this is what they've said to me. Kevin, I was too busy taking notes. I forgot about that. What good were your notes? So, yeah, it's one of those things that we see on a constant basis, even in ourselves, that we get too lost in the weeds ourselves. Okay? So, don't. Now, it's okay to conclude the interview and to have a good segue, but make sure there's a conclusion and there might be a sequel. And what I mean by that is a few things. Always ask the person if there's anything more. Okay? When they get to the end, is there anything else you need to tell me, you feel you need to tell me, anything else that you can think of? And then a good way to spur their memory on and spur their thought process on is ask if they have questions. Okay? Is there any other questions you want to ask me? Is there anything you want to know? And then, if they're to the point, nope, that's it. Fine. Give them your card or provide your contact information, whatever the case may be, and let them know if they think of anything else to just reach out. Give me a phone call, give you an email. Just reach out and let you know that there's been something else or you need to talk again. But also advise them that there might be follow-up. And the best way to do that is say, look, I've still got other people to interview. I've still got to go over a lot of documentation, a lot of the material from the actual incident scene and the data that I'm gathering. So I might have to follow up and ask some additional questions depending on what shows up with the data that I gather. I'm still torn with the term evidence. Okay, I prefer to call it data because it's benign, it's non-adversarial, and it's basically information. Okay, when you start to talk evidence, people's hairs on the back of their neck stand up, they start to shiver, they get eyes glazed over, and they're wondering if they should run. Okay, so just advise it, maybe follow up depending on what the data tells you. Okay, nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, another word of warning here. Avoid personalized conclusion of follow-up unless, a few points, that person was directly involved in the incident and they may need closure, or they may need to be the supervisor, or both, or something to that effect. If they're immediately involved or have immediate concern, but if they're a bystander or a witness, then you're and they're going to want to know, are we going to know what happened and everything? By all means, follow your preset procedure that's hopefully outlined, in your safety management system. That being, hey, I'm going to give a presentation to the executive. I'm going to let the supervisor know immediately my findings. I'm going to give a presentation to the executive in the next little while, and I'll be doing it with the Health and Safety Committee. Those are the three things that are usually generally going to happen. Usually the way it works, and I find, is the executive wants to know first, then the Health and Safety Committee, and the supervisor. Ideally, what it should be is the supervisor should come with you to the Health and Safety Committee. You make a presentation to the Health and Safety Committee. Allow for them to provide you any additional recommendations that they may consider as important, and then make your presentation to the executive, because the Health and Safety Committee is responsible for understanding what's occurred and making recommendations to the employer. And so it just works best. Going over and above the safety committee first is never a good thing, okay? It sort of destroys that trust and transparency. Just a word of warning. So, what do you think? Okay, don't forget to comment. I appreciate your comments, especially if you're taking in the live stream afterwards and it didn't get a chance to go through the whole thing. You might want to ask additional questions, might have other questions that have come up, etc. By all means, post them in the comments. I try to answer every one. And in fact, I just did a poll where YouTube has got a new feature out where I can do a short video and answer comments. And I asked your opinions on that because I just recently answered a couple. I'll talk about those in a sec. And so go back to the poll and let me know what you think about using short videos to answer your comments. I also appreciate that because if you prefer them long form and say the shorts have no merit and the majority rules, well, guess what? The channel's about you. It's not about me. So at this point comes the Q&A. And I'll talk about some of the questions that occurred throughout the last 2 weeks. And yeah, and of course, if you have additional questions about the interview or the incident interview process and taking statements, by all means. Now, the first one that came up is this fellow asked, morale inside, can I explain what is safety sampling? And I did a short video on that. Now, it's a bit of a complex answer, and that's why I said there's a longer answer, and there's an even longer answer after that. So I'll talk about that in a sec. So the first thing is we have to understand that safety sampling is sampling data that's gathered or, generated by the safety activities. So incident investigations, inspections, those sort of things. Whether it be informal inspections, formalized inspections, whatever the case, whatever we're doing, we're generating safety data. Okay? And so there's going to be sampling types and techniques that are going to come from that, even if it is sampling Health and Safety Committee meeting minutes. Okay? Now, we have to also understand that our sampling technique is going to differ, and it's going to be totally dependent on purpose. So why are you sampling the data? What purpose is it for? And the purposes could range from, say, executive reports, so they can do budgeting, or they may just want to know how the safety system is working at the point, to compliance validation, or etc. Like, for instance, are you sampling for auditing or sampling for an investigation, or is the audit part of the investigation? Is it a certification or status audit? Say, for instance, the certificate of recognition. Is that why you're auditing? Is this a hygiene investigation and you're taking sampling, and sampling is going to be part of incident investigations or incident complaints or worksite inspections, etc.? So the important thing is we have to match the purpose with the type. Okay? And when I talk about types, there's all sorts of different types. Okay? We're looking at probability versus non-probability sampling, targeted, bulk, simple, random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, etc., etc. So here's the other question. Okay? Would you like to see a live stream lecture type of thing on the different types of safety sampling? Okay, let me know in the comments, the chat, add me to Facebook and post questions there, whatever the case may be. I don't mind. Yes, Provoking Safety is on Facebook, so by all means. And on that note, with the handout that I showed you earlier, I'll just bring it up again. Hang on. This one. If you want a copy so that you can form your own, by all means, let me know. I will likely look at seeing if I can send it via Facebook or you can pop your email into a message in Facebook or whatever, or I can send it over Facebook. By all means, I've done that quite a bit with people that have wanted help with assignments, etc., and I've done things over Facebook. Not saying if you're going to school, don't get me to proofread your assignments or whatever. If you want to ask a question, by all means, that's the way to go. I honestly really do not have time. I would have to wake up an extra hour earlier to provide you that time. So I don't have time to necessarily coach people through assignments, but questions and answers I'm more than willing to help with. Now, so if you want to know, want to do a live stream lecture on different types of safety sampling, by all means, let me know. So the next piece, the next question, what is dangerous occurrence? Now, I also answered that with a short answer as well. And a lot of times, different jurisdictions or different organizations like to separate close calls or near misses. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll say a near miss or close call is something where property damage could have occurred, but it didn't. Whereas a dangerous occurrence is where a person could have got injured but didn't. Myself personally, I don't like to complicate things. I just put it all under one, okay? Far as I'm concerned, it's all a close call, okay? Why complicate things? However, there's lots of folks that will want to separate the two. They want to separate it with a dangerous occurrence being that possibility of being injured but didn't get injured. And a close call or near miss is where nobody got hurt. Pardon me, where no property got damaged. Once again, like I said, to me it complicates things, but each to their own. Understand what your company or organization wants and then work within that. I'm a big proponent of keep it simple, stupid. Really and truthfully, I am. Because if I screw up and forget it, how many times are other people going to screw up and forget it? So, like anything else, I want to know what you think. If you like the live stream, let me know. If you like the videos, let me know. I also appreciate more also in the comments because a lot of people will say that YouTube doesn't acknowledge likes or subs or anything else like that as far as their algorithm goes. They prefer the comments and interaction. I prefer the comments and interaction because I want to know how I'm doing. I want to know what you're thinking, and I want to know the questions you have and that you want to ask. Okay? So, once again, what do you want to see added to the live stream that you would find helpful? Wrap up of workplace incidents that were significant in the news. No, I'm not going to do the Ohio train derailment. There are a whole pile of people investigating that. And to be quite honest, I don't know if we'll ever know the truth. Those are the way that things go. Train derailed. There you go. What about workplace fails and outlandish non-compliance picks? It's a little bit more for me to look for, but if you find that they're helpful or some lighthearted humor, by all means, I can include them. And also, if you know of upcoming legislative changes and you want some further explanation in your jurisdiction, I can do my best to try that, but depending, if it's outside of Canada, if it's in the U.S., I would have to do some extensive studying, and I likely wouldn't be much help. So I just threw that one out there. The biggest one that helps is asking questions. And it helps me to form answers. And you know what? It works well as a process in doing this. So we've kind of pretty much... what time we got here? Oh, look at that. We are hitting the hour. So if anybody has any further questions or anything else that they want to know, by all means, now's the time. Pop in and ask a question. If not, we will segue out of here. And for those of us that are having a weekend, enjoy the rest of our weekend. It's a long weekend here in Alberta. Yeah. and I'm looking forward to enjoying it. No significant plans, just working around the houses. But anyway, there we go. So do we have any other questions, any other thoughts? Is there any other information that you need? Because if not, I'm going to close off. So speak now or forever hold your peace. There we go. Anyway, it's been great. Thank you for the opportunity to present information on gathering and conducting incident interviews. So until we see each other again, do me a favor, always be that leader, be that safety leader, be that influencer. And don't just talk about safety being a thing, but actually do it. Walk the walk. Okay? Provoke safety. Okay? Take care. Bye for now, folks.